What's up everybody, I'm Max from Splice, and today we're going to talk about some mixing tips that I wish somebody had told me when I started mixing. I learned this stuff by trial and error and messing it up, and hopefully you can profit from my pain. I'm going to take you through some common mistakes that I used to make all the time, still make every once in a while, and hopefully you can apply that to your own mixes so that it's a little bit easier for you. When I first started out, I thought that as long as I'm using the same speakers or as long as I'm using the same headphones, I would, begin to understand where I'm at and my mixes would get better. Okay, yes, they would, but I didn't understand that what's around me also makes a difference. For example, this is why people put up acoustic treatment like I've done here. The reason why you put up acoustic treatment is because you want to dampen the reverberations from sound coming around the room. As you see here, I have some panels on the walls. Hopefully that is accomplishing what I want, but even so, it's important to note that my room is still far from perfect. To illustrate this, I'm going to show you a measurement that I made using software called Sound ID Reference, which takes measurements of the frequency response of your room and then calibrates your room such that it's closer to a flat frequency response. So let's take a look. I made these measurements using a measurement microphone and standing at different places around the room, guided by the software. And what I found was that here is the frequency response curve of my particular room before any calibration is applied by the software. So we see that in the sub area, I'm a little lacking. And then in the 130 hertz, I have this big spike. That's really the biggest issue with the room. Getting into the theory of why this happens acoustically is a little bit outside the scope of the video. For now, it's just good to understand that different rooms are going to be different. And so the best way to combat this is to listen on different listening systems, right? Test out as many playback systems as you possibly can once you have your mix. Listen on your phone, listen in your car, listen on your Bluetooth speakers, listen on your earbuds, listen on your headphones, your friend's headphones, if you go to another studio or something like that. If you play out, play it at the club, see how things respond. Testing your mix out on many different playback systems will help you avoid any pitfalls that may have been introduced by issues in your listening environment. The next tip that I wish someone had told me was use solo, but don't use it too much. If you use solo too much on every single thing and try to get every single stem exactly how you want it to sound while it's soloed, it's probably not going to come out super well because you're not addressing the mixing together of the stems in context. You're just trying to make them all sound as good as possible, but really what you want is for them to sound as good as possible together, not as good as possible individually. So solo is good for detailed work. For example, let's take these vocals. I solo this main vocal when I want to figure out exactly how much of this breath noise to cut out. I have it gated out here, so you're not hearing it. Let's turn off the gate. Okay, so you hear this breath noise here? This is something I probably wouldn't be able to pick up if I was just listening with everything. I can't really hear the breath noise, so I solo it to understand exactly where the breath noise is and exactly where I want to go to. So take this out. Okay, so we start right there, and I want it to start exactly here. Okay.
Can't wait for the first night.
Okay, nice. And now we check it in context to make sure everything is fine.
Can't wait for the first night.
So that's an example of when solo is really good. But if I just solo, for example, let's say maybe I solo this percussion. Maybe I would be tempted to put a lot more processing on it. I'm always tempted to put drum bus on all my percussion stems. And I might think if I'm soloed, okay, yeah, let's pump it up. It sounds great. Okay, awesome, right? But let's see what happens when I take solo off.
Can't wait for the first night. Can't wait for the
drums are overpowering, and now I basically can't even hear the vocal. So all of the work that I just did, okay, it wasn't very much work, but I'm just, just showing you all the processing I just applied doesn't really make sense in context. So it doesn't make sense to work on it that way. Maybe a little bit, but just make sure that if you're using solo while you're processing stems, check a lot and turn off solo a lot to make sure that you're not doing anything that doesn't make sense in the context of the entire song. Okay, so this next one I definitely wish someone had told me a long time ago, because I spent a really long time completely messing up my mixes doing it. When I started mixing, I read a bunch of blog posts and articles that said the purpose of EQ is to carve out space for every instrument to have its little area in the frequency ranges that it's supposed to live in. And, you would use EQ to kind of sculpt the stems around each other so that they fit in nicely. Okay, so when I started out, I would just think, okay, whatever, let me just high pass this and we'll be good to go. I'll turn this on and then I'll find the fundamental and put it just under this. Okay, but the issue with this is that even though the fundamental that I'm mostly working with is around here, and even though I am cutting out all of this frequency space for instance, like my bass or my drums or my vocals maybe to live, I am losing all of the character that might come with anything that's kind of lower in this range. So I would not recommend actually doing this instead. High passing everything is just going to make everything sound kind of like dull and flat, and all the sounds will lose their character. So instead, I recommend using a low shelf. Oh, sorry, that's a high shelf. That's a low shelf. And basically, we're just, instead of completely filtering out everything down here, like everything below a certain range, we're just turning down everything below a certain range. And we can do it gently. We can, change the Q a little bit to preserve a little bit more of this lower character. So here, you might not be able to hear the difference, but let's see. So we had this little spike. Wonder what that was. Yeah, I don't know. So just some low harmonic. I can't really hear it even myself. I'm not quite sure what that is. But so if we completely filter it out, it's going to sound different. It's going to sound more thin. And even though we're making more room, it's not generally preferable to just completely high pass unless you have a good reason. Okay, so this next one, I have to admit, is really hard. And it's something that I still don't really do quite enough, despite the fact that I'm making a video recommending that you do this. I could still take this advice myself. Take more breaks. If you lose your objectivity, you're not going to be making good decisions about what you should do with your mix, and it's going to impact how your mix sounds very negatively. So I would say, they say every hour you're supposed to go outside or like go do something else for 10 minutes. For me, doing that every hour isn't necessarily possible. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe you have meetings, maybe you have whatever, maybe you just get lost in it and you're like really on a good roll. I personally don't like time it to be like, okay, now I have to leave now that it's been exactly an hour. But I would say at least once every like 2 hours, get up and go touch grass. I'm serious. It's going to be so good for you and your health and the health of your mixes. Okay, my next tip that I wish somebody had told me earlier is not really something that you're going to hear very often from a lot of, manufacturers or engineers who have their favorite plugins or whatever. Stock audio effects are your friend. They're honestly really good a lot of the time and accomplish pretty much everything that you need other like third-party plugins to accomplish, or even better. I mean, for example, I'm using Ableton right here in this session, and I think that Ableton has some of the best stock effects that you can get. For example, drum bus I use on pretty much everything. I think I've said this in basically every video that I've made. So I have a drum bus right here, and let me just show you what exactly this is doing. So this is my subgroup, and that's what it sounds like. Now without the drum bus, weak, flat, pathetic. With the drum bus, Chad goes crazy. In context,
can't wait for the first night. Wait for the first day. Can't wait for the first leg. Can't wait for the first time when you say that you'd rather stay. Can't wait for the first date.
Yeah, so drum bus goes crazy. Also, glue compressor I'm using on this group as well. So just to give you a little A-B. Even at only about 5 dB of gain reduction here, I still think it adds a nice like quality to the sound. I think it makes everything a little bit beefier while still being pretty transparent. So this is a super nice effect as well. Honestly, if you look, I'm not gonna lie and say I don't love third-party plugins. I use them all the time. I just used ProQ in a tip that we just did. So all the time I'm using third-party plugins as well, but don't be afraid to use stock audio effects just because they're stock. A lot of times they're really great. I want to give a little shout out to some other DAWs too. So for example, like Gross Beat in FL is amazing. Like Edison is incredible. Logic has some great stuff with like the space designers and the delay designers I really like. Also like Reason, it has some of the best stock plugins that you can get. So most DAWs, I would say, try out the stock plugins. Don't be prejudiced against them just because they come from the factory. Okay, my last tip is super important to me. A wise engineer told me this one time, and it stuck with me for a really long time. I think it makes sense for both engineering and production. A mix isn't done until you can't take anything else out of it. So what does that mean? That means that every single thing in your mix has a purpose. There's a reason why it's there. You like it. It sounds the way it should sound and the way that you want it to sound. Otherwise, just completely get rid of it. I had a double originally when we recorded it. Actually, this was a triple. These are kind of like ad-libs, even though this track does say double. And it sounded like this.
Can't wait for the first night. Can't wait for the first day. Can't wait for the first touch.
So even though it's really good on timing, because the vocalist, Rouge, who I'm working with, is, incredible in terms of timing. I mean, crazy. Even though that was perfectly on time and the delivery sounds really good, this double still kind of muddied up the mix. So I just completely ended up getting rid of it. And here's how it sounds.
Can't wait for the first night. Can't wait for the first day.
Cuts through a lot better, and it's a lot less muddled simply from removing something instead of trying to get it together. So what I'm trying to say with this tip is if something's not working for you, let it go. Like Marie Kondo, right? If it doesn't spark joy in your mix, then just simply take it out. Okay, this is a little bonus. I'm not sure if we're going to leave this in or not, but I've been writing some Zen koans that deal with audio engineering, and there's one that pertains to this particular topic that I thought I would share. So I'll do a little dramatic reading. When the nun Chiyono studied composition under Buko Vengaku, she was unable to attain the fruits of meditation for a long time. At last, one morning she was limiting her project's synth-based stems in a cracked instance of Ozone 5. The plugin crashed, and the multiband compressor's makeup gain was reset to -infinity, and at that moment Chiyono was set free. In commemoration, she wrote a poem. In this way and that, I tried to save the track's arrangement, since the master bus was redlining and about to clip, until at last the bottom fell out. No more bass in the arrangement, no more mud in the mix. So the moral of the story is, if something isn't working, feel free to just cut it instead of trying to smash it together in your arrangement and have it not work. I hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I hope that these tips are helpful, and I would love to see if y'all have any interesting tips that you wish someone had taught you before you started mixing. I guess not before you started, because that wouldn't have really been very helpful, but like when you were starting. So if you have any other tips that you want to share, please put them in the comment section. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.